My name is Arthur Griffin, and this is my essay on life before, during, and after the military. Traveling by train was the main mode of travel. The small city of Rutland was a bustling hub of urbanites from the big cities of New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. The Flatlanders and Leaf Peepers visited Vermont to pick apples, ski the many resorts, fish, hunt, purchase homemade and maple products, and mostly escaped the crowded, noisy, and dingy cities they lived and worked in. The neighborly environment of the rural Green Mountains provided a restful retreat from the stressful hustle and bustle of the city. Unfortunately for the locals, employment opportunities were limited to service industry jobs that supported the tourism industry, from establishing production plants that provided higher wage employment to preserve the natural beauty that attracted the tourist. When Rutland became my hometown in 1961 at the age of 10, the train station was a group of abandoned buildings and a parking lot where we kids played kickball across from the tenements we lived in. In later years, I watched the buildings be demolished and replaced by a shopping plaza. As teens, our plans for the future started with leaving Rutland to find the opportunities to fulfill our aspirations and secure our dreams. The child of a family plagued with alcoholism, I endured the violence, physical and mental abuse, neglect and ridicule that accompanied the disease until I was old enough to fend for myself on the streets. As a teen, I became a typical juvenile delinquent who was constantly chased by the cops for the infractions of the 9 o'clock curfew, truancy, shoplifting, and trespassing. When I was 14, I became a ward of the state when an abandoned house my brother and I were staying in caught fire and we were sent to reform school for a year. Because we were labeled as fire starters, the state could not place us in group homes, so we were remanded back to our family, which put us back on the street. I quit attending school in the 10th grade to help my sister care for her baby while she worked in the kitchen of the hospital as a dietitian. After I turned 16, I made plans to join the Army as my best opportunity to get away from Rutland. Recruiters sent me to Albany, where I took and passed the entrance exams and physical. 2 weeks following my 17th birthday, I was inducted into the Army and vowed that I would never return to Rutland. My first duty assignment following basic training in AIT as an infantryman and radio operator was at Fort Carson, Colorado. Shortly before my 18th birthday, I received orders for Vietnam and arrived there on August 1st, 1969. The war in Vietnam was a traumatic experience for an 18-year-old young man who hadn't even started to shave. When I arrived at the replacement station as a private first-class radio operator, I was assigned to the Company C, 1st of the 16th Infantry Battalion, 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. My first duty assignment was at a listening post somewhere near Pleiku in the Central Highlands. There were 3 of us there to watch over a large marsh that the Viet Cong traveled through to be undetected, carrying supplies to their underground camps. Our job was to report to headquarters by radio any movement through the area. Our post consisted of an area about 12 feet by 12 feet square, with a double row of sandbags piled 6 high, and a canvas tarp stretched between 4 engineer stakes to keep out the rain. In Vietnam, names didn't mean much, so most people went by a nickname that was usually given by someone in the group. Because of my short stature, I was given the name Short Round by my fellow bunker mate. Murph and Stretch were older than I was and had been in the war for a while. They told me lots of stories and gave me a lot of advice about how to survive the war. We sat in that little bunker, taking turns sleeping, eating, watching, and sometimes wishing for something to happen, to break up the monotony and give us a chance to fire our weapons. About once a week, a helicopter brought us food and water and reminded us that we weren't really alone. The rest of the world was out there, and it was more than a voice on the radio that we responded to with the words, "Sit Rep Negative," We were there for about 3 weeks when one quiet night I experienced my first of many firefights. We were hit with mortar fire and overrun by a large force of Viet Cong. When we radioed headquarters and told them we were taking heavy fire and had one man wounded, they ordered us to withdraw to the hills behind us and wait for help to arrive. Stretch and I grabbed our weapons and ammo and headed for the hills behind us. We each grabbed one of Murph's arms and dragged him with us. Helicopters came about 30 minutes later, picked us up, and we abandoned Post 9 Alpha. Combat in Vietnam was usually a firefight between small forces that lasted from minutes to a couple of hours. It wasn't like other wars with large forces that battled for days to force the enemy out and occupy new ground. The war in Vietnam was a war of attrition, locating the enemy and capturing their supplies so they were unable to fight and forcing them to give up. It's hard to identify an enemy who is part of the local population that you are trying to protect. Most often, the people who are working for the Army during the day as kitchen help or cleaning women are fighting the Army at night. After one firefight, we found the body of a Vietnamese man who was our company barber, whose wife and daughters operated the company laundry and a gift shop. Although you might want to help the people who are living in poverty by American standards, it's hard to trust anyone because you don't know who the enemy is. For the soldier, the only goal of the war is to survive the tour of duty and go home. Because everyone has a different date to go home, people are coming and leaving on a regular basis, so it is difficult to establish any lasting friendships. By the time you have lost a couple of friends, killed in firefights, you don't want to get attached to anyone and experience the pain of loss and remorse again. Every day I think about the friends I made and lost in Vietnam, especially a man who was like a big brother to me, whose death I witnessed. After that, I felt that my destiny was to die in Vietnam, and I became withdrawn and unfriendly towards others around me. I developed a high state of vigilance from the random rocket attacks that made sleeping difficult, rarely sleeping more than 2 hours at any time. I started drinking alcohol, snorting cocaine, and smoking marijuana to deal with depression, sleep deprivation, and survival guilt. Although life did not matter to me, I still felt a responsibility to perform my duties because others were depending on my experience to help them survive. I did not want to be responsible for others dying because I did not do my job. After that, I did not care about living any longer. It was my desire, and I believed my destiny, to die in Vietnam. I extended my tour in Vietnam, and although there were a few times I thought I was going to be killed, I've survived Vietnam and left the 11th of March, 1971, completely confused about what to do with my life. No aspirations, goals, or plans for my future. With no plans made for after Vietnam, I decided to return to my family in Rutland. My parents, for the first time in my life, were proud and happy to have me home. I got a job at a factory that had recently opened up making wooden pallets and reels. My mother was happy that I was giving her money to pay the bills, buy groceries, and protect her from my father. My father was glad to have me buying the booze, but angry with my use of drugs and smoking marijuana. As much as I hated my family life when I was a boy, now I embraced it and accepted my position as a member of a family plagued with alcoholism, and I could drink and fight with the best of them. Somehow I survived 19 months in Vietnam and returned to a home and family that 2 years ago I had wanted to get away from. But I did not leave Vietnam behind. The memories of men I had killed and the friends I watched die haunted me, and I turned to drugs and alcohol to self-medicate my problems away. When I met a girl who became my wife and the mother of our 3 children, I quit drinking and using drugs. My wife was patient and understanding when I had nightmares. I managed to work, support my family, and be a successful member of society despite my psychological problems. Over the years, the nightmares became less frequent and the bouts of depression less severe, but they never went away. I kept telling myself I was okay and I could handle my condition. The psychologist I spoke with diagnosed me with PTSD. I was prescribed medication to help me sleep better and regulate my depression. 3 years of treatment have really helped me finally feel like a normal person and inspired me to deal with the psychological issues of PTSD without self-medicating through drugs and alcohol. I cannot change the past, but I can shape the future for the young servicemen who return from the conflicts now. I am continuing my education to become qualified as a case manager so I can work with veterans, helping them improve their lives by getting the treatment and benefits they need and deserve.